Alright, now at this point with your project, we're ready for assembly, so you should have all three pieces, A, B, and C, all completely manufactured and ready to go. So our job and our goal is we're going to take all these pieces and put them together. We're going to go through a process called lamination, which means that you're taking like 2 or more pieces of wood and you're gluing them together to make like one solid piece. And these to go together in a specific order, so make sure you pay attention. Part C goes on the very bottom. It's probably in your best interest if there's any like markings or anything, take and erase them, get rid of them. If you can't get rid of them, it'd probably be a good idea to go through the process of just sanding them off with sandpaper. After that's done, this piece goes on top. It doesn't matter if there's writing on this one or not. And this is the orientation that this goes in, just like this here. And then last but not least, will be our top piece. Top piece goes together just like that. You'll notice that there's like a short side and a long side. Short side goes to the back. So if we take this and rotate it around, this is just a dry fit. This is what your project should look like when it's put together. Alright, so the first step, you're going to need to take part C, place it on the very bottom just like this. Part B goes on top. Try to line up the back edge right here in this area. Keep it nice and even. If your pieces aren't exactly straight, like nice and even, like the right width and height, or the right length and width, that's perfectly okay. Lay that on top. We're going to trace this out with a pencil. And this area right here that we're going to scribble out, this is going to be where our glue is going to go. We're going to put a layer of glue on here and take this piece and glue it down and tack it with some nails. You're going to need to grab yourself a red toolbox at this point. You're also going to need to grab yourself probably a wet paper towel. This guy here, this is called a nail set. It's not a center punch. We'll talk about why it's not called a center punch in a little bit. You're going to need to grab yourself a hammer. It's probably helpful to have a C-clamp or two. Wood putty. And last but not least, one of these big quick grip clamps. Alright, next step. You're going to take yourself your bottle of glue. Don't go overboard with it, but you need to spread a decent amount on part C. Make sure that you stay away from this inside edge right here where the line is. Try to keep about, like I'd say, a 1/4 inch of a gap. Take your finger, spread it around a nice even layer, and you're just creating a nice yellow film. Nothing crazy. Spread it around with your finger just like so, and do this on both sides. One side as well as the other side, just like this. It's also very helpful at this point to take your wet paper towel. You can wipe your finger off and it cleans it off. Boom, just like that. Now at this point, we want to take part B, lay it right on top, like so. Try to position it as close to like a straight, even back side as possible. Front side and the like 2 edges don't matter as much. So at this point, you want to grab yourself one of these guys here on the clamp table. This is called a quick grip clamp. The way these guys work has a stationary end right here. This doesn't move. That's what stationary means. And then this end right here, this part of the clamp, moves back and forth on this black metal, like you could say, bar. There's a couple different knobs and levers on here. Don't touch this little adjustment here. That just holds this nice and still so it doesn't move. But there's 2 other knobs on here, or little levers that you can move around. First, this little one right here. As soon as you squeeze that trigger, you can move it back and you can move it down. As soon as you let it go, you can't pull it apart anymore, but you can slide it together. Once you get to about, I'd say, close to tight, but not quite the whole way, you can slide these together. Let's say we're clamping this guy down here. You can squeeze this trigger, slide it together, and right now it's still pretty loose. We want to take this big, large black handle, squeeze it until it's nice and tight, and this is not going to go anywhere. If we want to release it, you squeeze the small trigger, it'll pop open, and you can take it apart just like that. So we're going to need this to clamp our 2 pieces together and clamp them to the table so we can nail them without them moving. So the next thing, we want to clamp these guys to the table. Take your quick grip clamp. I just showed you guys how to use it. Stick the stationary foot under the table. The movable one goes on top. Get it close. You're going to squeeze it a couple times. Before you go and make it really tight, make sure everything's lined up because the glue makes a slick surface and it wants to move these pieces around. Once you're happy with where it's at, squeeze a couple times. And then this thing is not going to go anywhere. Alright, for the next step, we're going to need to grab ourselves a few of these like little wire brads, or they're known as nails. Sometimes the smaller ones they call brads. Stick one in each hole. We're gonna have to do this a total 4 times. We need to take ourselves a hammer, and we need to tack them down until the top of the nail or the nail head is flat and even with the top surface of the piece of wood. Now we have to remove the clamp by pushing down on this little black lever here, taking it off. For the next step, we're gonna take more glue, put it on the very top. We don't have to trace anything out like we did last time, but the same general rule of thumb applies. You want to keep it away from this inside edge. Notice how there's no glue seeping out on the inside here. If there was, we'd have to wipe that away. When you start staining specifically with wood, if you have a layer of glue, it creates like a barrier and it doesn't let any stain in, and it's going to leave like these nasty blotchy white or like yellow marks, which isn't nice. So try to keep the glue that we smear around right here, again, away from the edge. Smear it around with your thumb or your finger, whatever is most comfortable. And you want to do this the whole way across the top to make a nice even like yellow coating of glue. If you run out of glue, like on this side, I feel like I'm running a little bit shy. You can see like there's a little bit more on this side than there is this side. You can add a little bit more, but please don't go overboard with it. If you put too much glue in here, it just makes a giant mess and then it's a pain just to get rid of. Wipe your fingers off with a wet paper towel. Move it towards the edge of the table. Take your quick grip clamp, and we're going to repeat that same process we did with the part C and B. Clamp it to the table. Remember, don't clamp it down the whole way. You want to move it and make sure that everything's nice and lined up before you make any final movements. We're going to squeeze this down like so it doesn't move. And now we're going to put a total of 6 nails in the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to basically repeat like what we did last time when we put the previous 2 pieces together. And you're going to put 3 nails in each side. Slide them down inside like so. And they should just slide right into the holes. Then you're going to take your hammer and tack them in the rest of the way until it's completely flat. Next, take your clamp off. And the next thing we want to focus on working on is these nails here. It's like a general rule when it comes to that isn't really spoken about or talked about too much when it comes to woodworking. You want to conceal or try to like hide your fasteners. In this case, we have 6 really shiny nails that aren't exactly too beautiful for the top of this thing. We got to hide them. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using this guy right here, which is called a nail set. And it's not a center punch because it doesn't have a point on the end. And it has like a little dished area. And this actually sinks the top or the head of the nail just below the surface. And we're going to use this in combination with or together with a hammer to sink these below the surface. Take the nail set, put it right on top of the hole, or I'm sorry, right on top of the nail. Tap it a few times. And your job is that you want to sink it just below the surface like that. And we're going to fill it in with wood putty in a little bit. So you do that a total of 6 times, once for every single one of these. So for the next step, we want to take ourselves some wood putty, which is usually kept in the woodworking cabinet. Take just a little finger's worth on the end, just like dip in, just get a little bit of it on. And you want to smear it all over that hole. And it's supposed to look like you put way too much on there. That's just what you want to make sure of. That way you get enough to cover up and conceal the hole. If you can kind of still see the hole, it means you didn't really put enough on. But at the same time, don't slop it all over the place and make a giant mess. But you want to conceal all these 6 holes. And eventually when it dries, it's not gonna be making these holes invisible, but they're gonna be less noticeable and it'll blend right in. The nice thing about this wood putty is not only does it dry pretty quick, but you can take a wet paper towel and it cleans your finger right off, just like so. Make sure that you take the cap and put it on top of the wood putty when you're done. Even if someone else is around you that's in line to use it, cap it off, because this stuff does dry out pretty quick and it can get wasted just like that. Now, with your project, I want you to do a quick inspection. Looks like we got pretty lucky here for the most part, but if you see any gaps in any certain areas, like I see a small gap here, as well as one on the side here, there's a huge one right here, we gotta take care of that and close it, and we're gonna be using a C-clamp for that. So the way you fix that, you take a C-clamp, open it up, and this is just a threaded rod that you can open up and close. You gotta make sure you grab some of my larger ones. The smaller ones just aren't gonna be able to cut it. What you'll do, so you can stand this guy up one end, and let's say it's the front or the back, you can place it wherever you need. You want to tighten this guy down, and it's important that you do this before the glue dries, because once the glue sets up, you can't really fix anything or try to go back and kind of like patch it or kind of squeeze it shut. So you got to go through and clamp it right away as soon as you're assembling everything. So that side's good, and I think just to be safe, I'm going to clamp the other side. Now, this step is not necessarily needed. It's only needed if your project has a small little gap on either side or some gap somewhere on your project. So you might need to use that to clamp it down so it doesn't go anywhere. Now, with that being said, the glue in combination with the wood putty takes about 15 minutes to dry, but the glue itself takes roughly, I'd say, to fully cure between 2 to 3 hours. It will set up very quickly, but 2 to 3 hours for it to completely cure and harden. So at this point, if it's sometime during our class period, I'm sorry, but I have to say, you got to stop. You can't go any further. You have to put this in the back room on the storage shelf, let it dry. You can either come to it later in the day if you have time, or we can come back tomorrow and it'll be completely dry and ready to go.